Women's Soccer Review Podcast with Dwayne Rollins and Jonathan Tannenwald on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Women's Soccer Review here on the Sports Podcasting Network. I'm Jonathan Tannenwald with the Philadelphia Inquirer. I know it's been a little while since we last did a show. I've been pretty busy in a few ways, I must admit. Those of you who follow me on Twitter know that the men's football club that I cover, the Philadelphia Union in Major League Soccer, is in the playoffs. And in fact, just a few hours after recording this show, we'll be playing their first game of this year's playoffs, which means that as ever, I have to scramble to keep the discussion on this show up to date and not being outdated by the time you hear it. I'll do the best that I can. It's me solo today. Dwayne Rollins will be back soon enough. I promise. We do have a show in the works I know that I've discussed on here before about the state of the Canadian national team program, especially now that they've hired Bev Priestman to be their new manager. That's something that Dwayne and I and some of our friends and colleagues up in Canada will get into soon enough. This show will be about the upcoming U.S.-Netherlands friendly on Friday in Breda, the old stomping grounds of U.S. Soccer Federation Sporting Director Ernie Stewart. And our guest to break down the team and some of the storylines in the game I'll take a swig of iced tea right there real quick for dramatic effect. Our guest is my longtime friend, Jeff Kassouf of Equalizer Soccer. Jeff and I have known each other for, probably at least a decade now. Spent a lot of time together in press boxes and at United Soccer Coaches Conventions and at college drafts of multiple professional leagues at this point in multiple different kinds of venues, from tiny little shoebox rooms to grand ballrooms at convention centers. We've seen a lot. Jeff has seen just about all of it. And one other thing I will mention as I bring Jeff in is that I'm sure all of you who follow Jeff on Twitter and know about all the work he's done for so long at the Equalizer, you all know that he promotes subscriptions to the Equalizer often, like the good owner of a website that he is. And I do the same with the Inquirer, and our mutual friend Meg Linehan at The Athletic does so with The Athletic, and so on and so forth. Jeff also is very kind to make the point that it's not just about the Equalizer. It is about all of us in this business who are trying to deliver subscription-based outlets and show that there is not just demand for women's soccer journalism, but that it can be translated into real money of subscription revenue. And for his many kind words to me, as I bring Jeff in now, let me say thanks and welcome, and it's great to have you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. That's a very kind introduction. Yeah, they definitely showing those things, all of us, the sustainability and capability of women's soccer media. So that's anybody listening who wants to make a dent on that, you can call us up or shoot us a DM, because there is a future there.
Should I have said Jeff Kassouf
that would be a lot
of football also?
That would be to some degree, but yes, really excited to be working on a partnership. I've had a lot of conversations through the years and even these months, and I think as many people in this industry know, and even just in like startups, which is something of what we are, even being 10 years old, 11 years old, is you have a lot of conversations that go nowhere. So it's exciting when you just click with folks who are on board with the same thing, and this came together in a matter of weeks, really. So this being a weekly show where we've kind of they have TV rights practically globally, but U.S. being a focus, and we have storytelling abilities and access to talent and some other things that I think I'm excited. I think there's more to come. So you can follow us on Twitter.com/Equalizer Soccer and Out to Football, obviously, for weekly scoop that will bring you, just to get you caught up to speed each week.
And I'm pretty sure that we'll have Esmeralda Negron, who co-founded Atalanta, on this show at some point. I've known her for a long time as well through her work with the International Champions Cup, and I believe, Jeff, if my memory is right, it's been a while, but if we do have her on, Esmeralda will be the first guest that we'll have on this show who I watched play soccer in college when she was at Princeton. And she was very, very good, by the way, back then. All right, let's get into the U.S.-Netherlands game Friday. To be played in Breda in the Netherlands. As I said, so much has gone into making this game happen. A lot of work, obviously, with the security and the logistics and the health. And it's certainly a risk. We already know that Lindsey Horan won't be there because she tested positive for COVID-19 before she left. We know that Viviane Miedema of the Netherlands also won't be there because she's injured. But let's say first, before we get into the U.S. roster, because there's a lot to discuss there, let's first give a hand, Jeff, to everybody who helped make this come together. As Vlatko Ananovsky said in the announcement of the game, if we're going to come back from a 8-month hiatus or whatever it is, it might as well be against the second-best team in the world and the reigning European champion. And I'm sure that a ton of work went into making this happen by the U.S. Soccer Federation, by the Dutch Federation, the KNVB. And so for all of us in the U.S. and Europe and beyond, we get to enjoy on the day after Thanksgiving, which should be a terrific game.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, selfishly plug that, I did a long story with U.S. national team, women's national team general manager Kate Markgraf about putting together programming in general, and that was kind of on the cusp of this game coming together and happening and officially being announced. And there is a lot that goes into it. So I think that's credit to not just her, and she said, but, people a little bit more behind the scenes too, Ryan Dell being one who was specifically shouted out, George Champas, on the medical side. But yeah, I mean, exciting to have a game again. Exciting is a weird word. I mean, it's just a weird time. I know we've been saying that all year and we're not done saying it. But, obviously safety being first and foremost, and hopefully, they put together that October camp with 685 tests, they said, and no confirmed positives. I like to use the term confirmed positives because I don't think you always know about. Maybe I'm not saying there was. In the Challenge Cup there was, as I reported, there were false positives that took place. But obviously Lindsey Horan not making the trip, having contracted COVID, and she says she's doing well, which is good. But hopefully they can go in and out without issue on all sides, all parties.
All right, let's get into the team, and we'll do it like we did we traditionally do. We go position by position. We'll start with the goalkeepers, and here we have in alphabetical order: Aubrey Bledsoe of the Washington Spirit, Jane Campbell of the Houston Dash, and Alyssa Nair of the Chicago Red Stars. I assume that Nair is going to play, certainly to start, and after that, I think things get very interesting. Let me ask the first question. Do you think she's going to play all 90 minutes? And if not, who gets the nod? Because I think that would be very
I would assume so. I mean, it's the first game in over 8 months. So I think as much as you want to see some things, if you're Vlatko Ananovsky, you want to also see your typical team together, your quote unquote starting team, which, mostly he's got here, minus, mentioned the Horan news, as a potential starter. So I think you want to see what you've got. And part of that is goalkeeping. I mean, Bledsoe and Campbell, both, 0 caps for Bledsoe. I mean, both inexperienced on the international senior level. So I would imagine at the very least, as you said, 45 for Nair. And then from there, who knows? I guess you could say you make a trip like this with the circumstances that you'd want, to play as many people as possible because you're traveling them in a risky situation. But, we can look at, and I know we'll talk about this later, but like Catarina Macario going and is only going to train, as we've been told. So it's not necessarily the case that I don't think they're going to want to just play people just to play them, because I think you have to look at this as potentially this is one of 4 to 7 or so games that you might get, and you really don't know what that number is going to be because of the scenario of what's going on before the Olympics that hopefully happen. So I think you've got to use it in a way that you get some answers that you need out of it, not necessarily just let me get some players' minutes. Not that you need answers out of Nair per se, obviously, but I think you're probably looking at it. I would think a full strength lineup.
The sound effects, believe it or not, is because I'm recording this from my office and wearing a mask half the time. Having my computer serviced by the tech staff of my newsroom, so apologies for a little bit of the natural sound in the background.
Sounds very newsroom.
It is, even though there's nobody here, or next to nobody here, which is kind of odd. But that's the life that we're in. About the goalkeepers, too. Ashland Harris isn't here. Eddie Franch isn't here. And Vlatko Ananovsky also mentioned Casey Murphy in a Zoom call that he did with all of us in the media after the roster was announced. That takes the depth chart out to 6, Jeff. And I don't remember a U.S. national team goalkeeper depth chart at 6. Certainly not in terms of anybody with a reasonable shot of playing time. Do you?
No, but I think you've got to take what he said there, and yes, I mean, is it open to the degree that Eddie Franch has been hurt, Ashland Harris, maybe toward the tail end of her career, Bledsoe Campbell trying to break in, Murphy being the youngest of the bunch, obviously played for Ananovsky in Seattle, Tacoma. So, I think that comment to me is, if we're speaking realistically here, it's a backup and an alternate for the Olympics, which is nothing to sniff at, obviously, but more so, I think, is alluding to 2023 when, you've got 3 years till the next World Cup. No idea what Nair's going to be doing, even though she is obviously the incumbent. And I think at that point you could say, well, I don't think anybody would be expecting Harris in 2023. So Bledsoe, Campbell, and then Murphy being the youngest. I think that's where you start talking about, okay, that feels wide open. But as far as Olympics go, with how close they are and a few opportunities there are between now and then, I think you're talking about who's going to be the backup to Alyssa Nair. Then maybe do you bring a younger player, quote unquote, for an alternate for that experience, which I think we've seen and heard these stories through the years that can pay off in the next cycle. But I don't know that it's necessarily, look, it's a deep pool, yes, but it's not necessarily that we've got this wide open storyline as we had in post 2016.
I suppose that I think of it more as, and I agree with you on all of that. It's a lot of very good points. I almost think of it as, we're so used to one goalkeeper getting almost all the minutes over almost an entire cycle, And here's now a very real possibility that that's not going to happen this time, which is going to be very interesting. And it, I assume that Franch is number 2.5 on the depth chart. She's not here because she's injured. And as we get into the defenders on this roster, we come around to one of the questions that don't we just love to talk about over and over and over again, which is the future of Ashland Harris and Ali Krieger. Sorry to do that to you, Jeff, because we all take our poundings on Twitter on the question constantly. On this squad, Alana Cook, Abby Dahlkemper, Tierna Davidson, Crystal Dunn, Kelly O'Hara, Margaret Purse, Becky Sauerbrunn, and Emily Sonnet. And I guess we should talk about Krieger and Harris now. As I said, Ananovsky was asked about some of the other veterans, including Megan Rapinoe and Carly Lloyd. They still seem to be in the mix. Do we think that Krieger and Harris are, or are we waiting for an opportunity once the pandemic ends to have a testimonial for a whole lot?
No, I don't think. I mean, that's extreme. I think people will be. I think it'll be a big January camp, as big as they can make it, given the circumstances. I mean, Ananovsky already said, he expects Rapinoe and Lloyd in January camp. I think that'd be true. That's traditionally more around the 30 mark for players, and I think certainly everyone we've just mentioned would be in that group of 30. So, I think this one is, I think Vlatko Andonovski's been pretty true to the idea of rewarding league performances. Obviously, not a lot of league play this year, and then this camp, the names that maybe are quote unquote new or I don't want to say unexpected, but just not necessarily that regular rotation, which is really. Sophia Smith is newer, obviously, has had the injury. Christy Mewis is the big one. I would say Katerina Macario, obviously, is the headline person there, but, has been, as far as we know, as a reward for October training camp, which none of us saw beyond maybe a live stream of a few minutes of training that was only in the app. And I sure wasn't downloading the app for that. You got to give me more than that, U.S. Soccer. But, so I think this is a reward for training camp, and there's always sort of these circumstances that we're never 100% aware of, and training is one of them. But I would expect a big January camp and everybody to be in it, everybody healthy anyway.
Or at least everybody.
Yeah, yes, a good addendum. Yes.
Another question that I have that I've been wondering in looking at this group of 8. We assume that Kelly O'Hara continues to be the starting right back. What do you think the right back depth chart is at this point?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, Crystal Dunn obviously is still listed as a defender for U.S. Soccer's purposes, and probably won't be for the Thorns, I would think. But on the right side, I mean, I think you're still talking about O'Hara, obviously, and there's sort of the health questions, and then I think every evidence we've been given otherwise is that number 2 in that chart is Emily Sonnet, who's been very good, as by all accounts, in Sweden and had success there on this little half-year spell there or so. So I would expect that at the moment that's what it looks like, O'Hara, Sonnet, and they're obviously very different profiles in that position. But I think we did see some promising things at times from Sonnet in that position, even if it's not, I don't want to even say not her natural position so much as that, but also, it's not, she's not necessarily the attacking fullback profile.
Well, Midge Purce fits the attacking fullback profile quite well. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that. But I've said all along that she has said repeatedly that she wants to learn to play the position. And she talked about it quite a bit, especially during the summer, during the NWSL Challenge Cup, when we saw, for a little bit at least, with Sky Blue FC, sort of the proof of concept of how it can work with her playing there. And if she's going to keep saying that she wants to play the position and learn how to play it better, who are we to disagree with that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there's a very big difference, too, between the level of the NWSL Challenge Cup and the international level. And I mean, this is, the international level to the degree of a World Cup rematch a year and a half later. So I think, I would not shoot her right up that depth chart by any means. And, I think still to this day, I mean, even if you listen to Vlatko Andonovski talk about her in that position, and I'm forgetting where he said this. I think it must have been on one of these Zoom calls we've been on. Is, he said, "Look, am I being honest? That is defender her first position, or is she spectacular at it? Maybe not, but we see potential, and this is why." And so it very much. I mean, I think he's being open about the idea that this is a bit of a project, and I don't know that it's one that comes to any sort of fruition in 8 months' time here, but. We'll see. I mean, this is a question that every year, every tournament, I'm not sure why the deepest team in the world never seems to be very deep at fullback.
Nothing new under the sun in that regard, as you said. And it is across the board in American soccer in a lot of ways. And that's a discussion for another day, although it's on my mind because one of the other teams I cover is about to sell one of the best fullbacks in Major League Soccer, which is for Soccer Today, not for this show. But as I said, something that I have not been able to get out of my head for a while is the state of things with outside backs, and I very much agree with you on that. Okay, to the midfield. Julie Ertz, Jalen Howell, Rose Lavelle, Katerina Macario, Christy Mewis, Sam Mewis. As you said, Macario can't play in the game because she's not got her FIFA eligibility yet. There was sort of a very subtle when Ananovsky talked to us after the roster. Oh, but if FIFA happens to approve her eligibility while she's with us, then yeah, she'll play. Which I found amusing. And it's just another reminder, Jeff, that when she's ready to go, it is clear she's going straight into this team.
Well, certainly there's a lot of excitement. I mean, I think I'd hesitate, again, on straight into the team, but certain. Right.
Not into 11, but into
is part of
18
the plans
to 20
in the long term, and clearly, the short term, and the big question on the short term being the Olympics, obviously, and whether that's, I think that's going to be up to a lot of different factors, including who she's competing with, but also, how many opportunities does she have to show herself in a real game, and then it's interesting. There's always, these major tournaments. It's less of a, if this were a World Cup with 23 roster spots, we wouldn't even be talking about it. We'd be like, yeah, I mean, of course, Macario's going to go. She gets the FIFA approval, plays a couple of friendlies, but in a Olympics where you've got 18 spots, it becomes a lot trickier. That, this conversation 4 years ago was more around the health of Megan Rapinoe and maybe a little bit of Malpew, I guess, at that point. But, it seems to always be the case on an Olympic front. Do you use the spot on her, which is tough because you're already looking at Ertz, Horan, Mewis, Sam Mewis, that is, Rose Lavelle. I mean, there's 4 shoo-ins in midfield. So.
And if I make, and it's, this is a question that we've debated often and we'll continue debating, which is Andy Sullivan's place on that list. She's still injured, it seems like. Boy, would it be fascinating to watch her in this game if she was healthy and able to play, because this is a game that suits her skill set very, very well. But it's, that time's going to come too when we have to figure out whether Sullivan's going to knock somebody out of the 18 as well.
Yeah, I think that's, I was very high on her. I thought she was one of the better players in NWSL last year, even if it wasn't a, headliner MVP type performance like Sam Kerr or Dabinia, but probably a top 3, top 5 player in the league last year, even if, as ever, a sort of, I don't want to say defensive midfielder, but defensive-minded box-to-box, grittier midfielder doesn't necessarily have that sort of attention in general.
Well, and they're going to need a backup 6 at some point down the road. I don't know when, but, and, in time they're going to need a starting 6, obviously, since the current starter lives across town from me. It hasn't played in a while. And that's Julie Ertz, of course. Let's talk about Rose Lavelle and the situation, for lack of a better word, at Manchester City. You and I and a whole lot of other people have been getting up early in the morning repeatedly in the hopes of watching her play, and then not necessarily going back to sleep because Sam Mewis has been playing, but underwhelmed by her status at Manchester City. Vlatko Ananovsky believes that she is currently 90 minutes fit to play in a game like this one against the Netherlands. Gareth Taylor seems to have his own opinions.
Well, I don't think Gareth Taylor's opinions are to do with fitness from what we know. I mean, certainly with Ananovsky telling us when I asked him that on the call the other day, what her fitness is. So, that tells us she's fit. And I think, there are a lot of people feeling the jury is still out on Gareth Taylor and, the ability to keep Man City. Obviously, it's early days, but there's a lot of additional competition, at least at the top, when you look at the rivals across town at the top of that FAWSL. So I don't know that Man City's been particularly inspiring, and I think part of some small part of that anyway. You look at tactically speaking, and bringing in Rose Lavelle, you're bringing in a young, exciting, very capable on the ball number 10, and playing her. She's played out wide in the wing areas. She's played just not in an ideal spot, and obviously part of that equation is the player she's competing with, and Sam Mewis has obviously been basically a shoe-in starter upon arrival. So I think it's more about how Manchester City is using her or not using her. Unused sub there in that Manchester derby, which was probably disappointing for U.S. fans to see. But, you look at like a Carolyn Weir. There's talent in Manchester City, so it shouldn't be assumed that it's automatic that Rose Lavelle would start. But, yeah, I think she's been used in some strange ways when she has been on the field. And then that leads to, a question about fit, really, and whether – if you're Gareth Taylor, do you change the system and get everybody on the field, or do you have an odd player out, which seems to have been both the direction and Lavelle being that player at the current time?
We're going to pause here to take a quick break so that my producer, Kevin Laramie, can sell some ads. I mentioned all the various subscription outlets that are out there earlier, and one of them, of course, is the Sports Podcasting Network's Patreon. And we thank all of you who have helped support that. We thank all of you who've subscribed to the Equalizer and the Inquirer. I will mention that the Inquirer is running a sale this week, and it's a pretty big one. $29 for 1 full year of access to our website. You can get there at inquirer.com/Tannenwald, my last name. And if you do that, in fact, by that specific URL, it will accrue to me in terms of the numbers of subscriptions that I've been able to help drive, and the folks who count the beans, and also my bosses take note of that sort of thing, and they tend to like it when I do that, and it makes them know, most importantly, that we ought to do more soccer coverage. So if you get a moment, again, that's inquirer.com/Tannenwald. $29 for a year, and you can go to equalizersoccer.com, of course, to subscribe to Equalizer. And now let's take a quick break so that we can sell some ads. We'll be right back here on the Women's Soccer Review on the Sports Podcasting Network. Welcome back to the Women's Soccer Review here on the Sports Podcasting Network. This is Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Our guest is my longtime friend, Jeff Kassouf, founder of the Equalizer. And now let's get into the forwards on this U.S. roster to face the Netherlands. Ashley Hatch, Tobin Heath, Alex Morgan, and Charlie Morgan, her first national team cap as a traveler. And quite the life of the party so far, as we've seen on Instagram. Kristen Press, Sophia Smith, and Lynn Williams. And let's start with the Manchester United duo of Tobin Heath and Kristen Press, and in particular Tobin Heath, who has been straight into it and straight at her very best, I think. And some of the goals and assists that we've seen with her in red so far. And look, Jeff, you and I have followed Tobin Heath's entire career. We know how skilled, how talented, how creative she is. And sometimes I have to step back when people in other countries, including England, are seeing what she can do for the first time. Because you and I have seen it, as I said, for many, many years, and it's still exceptional. Yeah,
I mean, the goal she scored in that Manchester derby, I think, is one that'll be on repeat for a while, and part of the highlight package end of season and future promotion and marketing of that growing rivalry on the women's side, which is obviously a little bit fresh, even though the men's side obviously is a long-standing one. So, I think there's a fit thing here, too. We just talked about before the break, Rose Lavelle and fit at Manchester City. I think, Tobin Heath just fits the system of Casey Stoney's really well. And it's allowed her to be who she is. I mean, at this point in her career, toward the end of it, if we're being honest, it's, I think you need to know what you're getting, and you need to be aware that she and her skill set need to fit into that system you're building, and I think that's certainly the case. Certainly for Heath, and I think press has been used in different areas of the field by Stoney, and that's nothing new to her or for her career either. But I think Heath in particular has been influential, not in just the highlight reel goal as we saw against Manchester City in that comeback draw, but in providing service, consistent service and assists, and being kind of a focal point out on the wing especially. So it's been good to see. I think it's it's another one of many things for that league, really, that's exciting. And I think obviously the U.S. influx has drawn a lot of eyeballs from this side of the Atlantic, and obviously, thankfully, we're actually able to watch them on cable at times.
An entity that in NBC Sports that I will say very well. Not that they always treated you the best, but you certainly know them well, and it's been remarkable to see them make the step up in women's soccer, in addition to what they've obviously done as part of the Premier League's marketing industrial complex. And the illusion there was that Jeff worked at NBC for a time.
And they were good years. I was treated well.
As well.
Look, I've said this. I mean, we did things while I was there. We tried some things. I covered the 2015 World Cup in its entirety for NBC. It was actually briefly when Equalizer was technically a NBC property by way of too many complicated law things, but was had a peacock sort of related to it, and even then I think the idea that we'd be having FAWSL games on Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings with big name Americans playing in them, and they're running live on NBCSN, felt like a world away, and not just there, but in many places. CBS is doing it now with NWSL, so it's good to see.
You still have all the swag, if my memory is correct, too, and NBC does swag better than.
I've got the office set up here. Actually, we moved out of. I'll be very brief. We moved out of downtown Stamford, which was this like an office building with great location, really, for a great sandwich spot and that. But we had to leave for the new huge campus. This would have been end of 2012. And it was just like clean out time. So I grabbed this. NBCSN had just launched. It was still, now it's like it has to be called SN, but really back then it was the NBC Sports Network, which was Versus before that, really. And then I'm turning around a little bit from the mic to look at it. I've got this big poster from the launch, which has Thierry Henry in a Red Bulls jersey and Hope Solo. And who else is on this? Michael Phelps. And, so cool little couple things. Yeah. And then some other things. Got the Emmy in the background. That's probably the best swag.
That's a good one. Yes, yes. We do like to take people behind the curtain of the media a little bit on the show, as folks know. And I've been up to NBC's Stamford campus a few times over the years, not in a while, but it's a spectacular facility. And once all is back up and running, and they're able to marshal all of it again, the stuff they do up there is pretty neat. Let's see here. I wanted to ask about Alex Morgan, too. I in theory, the starting front three, if you're going with the full-strength 11 for this game, is press Morgan Heath from left to right. But Morgan's the question mark there as a matter of health and fitness. She's gotten on the field more for Spurs, made her first start recently. We don't know how much or how little she's going to play in this game, but what sort of expectations do you have at this point?
Yeah, I was going to say your full strength, in normal times, I guess. So perhaps by spring, we don't know. I mean, Vlatko Ananovsky's saying she's probably 45 minutes fit. Maybe they could get 60 out of her. That's basically just what she's gotten to at the point to with Tottenham after a couple, some setbacks along the way coming back. So I don't know. Expectations, I don't really have any. I mean, I think the idea that, she's back at this level and on the field is obviously accomplishment in itself to some degree. So I think whatever that looks like, I mean, obviously it's a friendly and you've got 6 subs, so maybe you want to run out that full 11 for 45 and you've planned to take her off at the half. We'll see in a very short amount of time here. But yeah, I would agree that that's probably, I wouldn't even say probably. I mean, at the moment, that would be, well, in an ideal world and maybe come spring, yes, that's your 3. I think maybe at the moment, the most like for like there and on form and everything is probably Lynn Williams, if you're being very conservative with Morgan, if you're U.S. Soccer. So maybe it's Williams in the 9. And there's obviously a lot of excitement about Sophia Smith, who's showed well in the fall series and has just been kind of battling some little injuries this year, among other, challenges of the year.
And I think about 2 things. One is about how a front 3 would change with Williams in the middle instead of Morgan, because Williams is not quite the same kind of target forward to take the kind of service that Press and Heath create. But I also think about, just as you alluded to a moment ago, how much of an opportunity this is for Sophia Smith if she is able to play and make her senior debut in a game like that.
Yeah, I mean it's right.
Even if it's only for 10
minutes.
Similar
to Macario, maybe with a little bit less hype and maybe not even hype, just so much the storyline around Macario, obviously, of citizenship and everything else. But is someone who I think U.S. Soccer is looking at as a player for the next 10 years type of player. And obviously that comes with dangers that we've seen. I think there have been players who have been touted as that and, have struggled to meet that expectation. And maybe if it didn't exist, we'd kind of view them through a different lens. But certainly a player that I think you can see too why they like her. I mean, she's obviously has the sort of physical attributes with her pace and everything. But I mean, beyond that, I think she's shown to be a very smart and mature player in this very little bit of time of her, I guess you call it quote unquote rookie season.
And we've seen the hints that she's not just a forward, that she's a true striker. And as you said, long way to go before she's an absolute stalwart and reaches all the heights with the senior team. But an awful lot of potential. And it's in terms of the pure striker's instincts, we've seen with the Thorns, we sort of knew that was the piece that they were missing. And she comes in during the fall series, and you can just, with Caitlin Best, who's done some work for you, I believe, as well, if my memory is correct, in addition to her work with the Rose City Review out in Portland, said it best. You could tell that she's not just, a forward as such, but a real honest-to-goodness number 9 potential.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something, obviously, Morgan from, up to 2019 there, I guess, and we haven't seen her since really, but has been in spectacular form, But, obviously, it is, I don't think this is anything looming per se, but, at 31, you look at a Smith and you say, okay, well, we're looking at 2023 and beyond. It's someone that you start planning around, maybe not immediately or in place of, but, as someone for down the line. And I think, the number 9 position is always one it's important to any team, but obviously, this is a team where that has evolved a bit, in different profiles, Abby Wambach before, in this kind of previous generation and iteration, and then overlap with Morgan, and Morgan kind of obviously a very different profile from Wambach, and that system is shaped, I'm not saying around her, but has changed alongside that and her. So, with Smith, I think you kind of get maybe a little bit more of a like for like to some degree, certainly than more so than the last changeover, I guess.
Yeah, sure. And we'll take a moment here to mention the Dutch roster, which is loaded. And that's part of the fun of this, too, obviously. It's not just the U.S. playing a game. It's playing it against a team that is almost equally star-studded on the world stage.
Yeah.
No Miedema, unfortunately. But Leneth Berenstein, Daniel van de Donk, Jackie Groen, and Stephanie van der Gracht. Who else is on this? Dominic Janssen. Lieke Martens is going to be there. Jill Roord's going to be there. Shannis van de Sanden is going to be there. Sherda Spitze, who's a player I like a lot, is going to be there. And Sarah van Veenendaal in net, who, as we know, was outstanding in the World Cup final all the way through the tournament last year. It should be a terrific game. Another reason, folks, to stay home and not go out is to sit and watch this game on Friday. How about that for a public service announcement? Jeff, it's been terrific having you on. Thanks for coming. And we will call time there. And thank you all once again for listening. A reminder one more time to subscribe to the Equalizer, subscribe to the Inquirer. That link again is inquirer.com/Tannenwald. That's one where I get the sort of the reference points.
Get the money.
My bosses know that. Well, I don't get the money. I'll say that, but it's something that they've set up here in our newsroom, and it's something that a lot of other newsrooms have. Where, in fact, I know The Athletic has it too. If you subscribe through the individual writer's sort of customized URL, it gets tallied up. And they see, especially in my case with soccer, where we're every day scrapping to try to get more attention in this town. That's one of the ways to prove the interest, is to go through that way. And, of course, as I said, the Sports Podcasting Network Patreon is there for you as well. Jeff, thanks again on behalf of my co-host, Dwayne Rollins, our producer, Kevin Laramie. This is Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer, thanking you for listening to the Women's Soccer Review here on the Sports Podcasting Network.